Uh, Datuk Paul Chan, founder, the chairman of the foundation, distinguished presidents, vice chancellors, professors, and colleagues. Now, thank you for inviting me here to present my slides. Before I start, I must apologize that being a vice chancellor, my principal duty is to talk and talk, And in the last 1 week, I have to give 3 talks, and today is another one, and next week will be another 2. So because of so many talks, sometimes you don't know what you're supposed to talk anymore. And forgive me, the slides I'm putting up, it is not so innovative as our previous speaker. The reason is simply because I'm using these slides for all these talks in the next 1 week, But I'm going to pick them up one by one that will be relevant to the case here. So I really apologize if you see that these slides are not really meant for this, but I think some of the slides are quite relevant. But let me just bring you back from the US to Malaysia, and let me tell you something about Malaysian higher education that I know. Maybe Datuk Paul Chan may know something else that I don't know. My university is the oldest. We are 100 years old. We started in Singapore, now we are in Kuala Lumpur. The one that is left in Singapore has become NUS. And you know NUS, isn't it? And there are 23 public and about 47, I was told, private universities in Malaysia. And the bad news, there are more coming, Informally speaking to the ministry, there are 20 more foreign universities coming soon, including the first from China, There's a large top 30 Chinese university that is setting up campus in Malaysia. But with that number, 23 public and 50 private, that's not as big as what is in Indonesia or Philippines, by the way. In the Philippines, there are 80 public universities and about 1,900 private. And in Indonesia, there are about 3,000, So Datuk Paul Chan, you are in a really stiff competition, I'm afraid, So higher education is exciting in Malaysia. I don't know how it will go. But let me tell you something about, let me tell you something about the public universities in Malaysia. The last 1 or 2 years has seen a lot of changes. We just got our autonomy status in the last 2 months. Autonomy means to be like you, free to do whatever we want, and that's the truth. We have just got that in the last 2 months. Before this, the government was very much controlling whatever we do. Now we don't have to even speak to the minister if we want to create new programs, create new faculties, or close those programs or faculties that we don't want. About 2 years ago, we have been given the self-accreditation status. In other words, we can run any program without referring it to the qualifications agency. Now, these are very new things that has just come, and we are trying to sort of lay out various things to operate under that new framework. And the most recent, and this was just a few days ago, the Parliament has now made the decision that students can actually get involved in politics, become members of political parties outside the university, and they can even take up positions within the university. Now, this is a very, very significant development. The problem is a lot of these students are in the public university. Somehow my impression is that a lot of students who are very much politically motivated is not very active in the private university. Maybe in the private university they know they have to study hard, otherwise if they don't make it, they will have to pay much more. But in my university, the students are very active. The students can demonstrate anytime, by the way. The staff will not demonstrate, they will have about 10 meetings with me before they decide to do so. And the most recent demonstration that is being planned is because I raised the parking charges because of illegal parking, so I decided to put some charges, and I heard news that they will demonstrate next week, So I'm as bad as you when it comes to people not being happy. But nevertheless, I was in a private university for 11 years, and now I'm running this public university, and my mission in this public university is to get all this business of transformation done, this business of making sure that the research university concept works, making sure that autonomy works, and making sure that the Institute of Malaya is one of the top in the world. Against a background whereby I cannot increase tuition fees at all. Can you do that, Can you survive in an environment like that? And our tuition fees only accounts for 8% of our revenue. And we must not talk about tuition fees to the ministry. We cannot talk about increasing hostel charges at all. Because the minute we increase that, the government is in trouble, you see. So we cannot. So, and I know in most universities, tuition fees is a major chunk of your income, but not for us. Ours is a very small amount. So our major income now comes from government, but under autonomy, we have been told that by 2020, we must generate funds to support 50% of our operating costs. And by the way, we now run on a budget of 400 million US dollar. By 2020, that will be something like perhaps 500 million US dollar, and I have to find half of that. So, Prof, maybe we can share ideas on how I can raise $250 million every year. I will pay you first class trip to my university. I will put you in the best hotel. You can tell me how I can raise 250 million US dollar a year. I would love all this, but I leave it to help for the moment, because my preoccupation is how to make that money. But never mind, that's the background of my university. We have 30,000 students, out of which 11,000 are postgraduates, and we have 4,000 international staffs, and my university employs 7,000 employees, out of which 2,200 are academics. The support staff within the university part is about 3,000, and we have another 3,000 in the hospital that we own, which employs about 3,000 staff, out of which 500 are medical doctors. So this is a very expensive university to run. Datuk Paul, don't use us as our model, You will not make it. Somehow it doesn't work anymore. How do I get this to work? Okay, by the way, this is our new building there, just in front of the lake. I know when Datuk Paul was there, he used to row on this lake, I think, to cool off. Now, let me just say that the other thing about my job is also survival, because as Vice Chancellor, I'm only given 3-year terms, and it's renewable for every 3 years. I don't get a very long term, because I think the government must be very sure that I'm okay there, and everybody can assess me, and the noise level is not too high. So every 3 years is all about survival, if I want the job. And I've survived my first term, by the way. And for that reason, many of those who don't agree with me, they don't understand why I'm still around, actually. Now, this is my perspective about trends in global higher education. First of all, I must say that actually higher education is shifting to the east. With all due respect, it is not in the west anymore. And I will show you graph why this is the case. Because we have super giants like China, Korea, we have Taiwan, we have India, and now I must say in ASEAN itself, and I do meet the presidents of ASEAN universities because we are in this ASEAN University Network, everyone is really aggressive, I must tell you. If you know a small country called Brunei, you must visit this university because they are now recruiting around the world the top professors. And the Vice Chancellor of University Brunei Darussalam a medical doctor, is also very, very aggressive. So I must tell you, this is a sudden change in the top universities in ASEAN, and I think very soon top universities in ASEAN will be making a mark. I do realize that budget size will determine quality and success. I think we all know the top 20 universities in the world has an operating budget of $2 billion and more. There are heavy investments in R&D. If you want to be a truly world-class university, there must be a lot of quality research in the system. It cannot be entirely a teaching university. Okay, rapid rise of global universities in the East and emergence of many more. This is what I've just said, that actually it is interesting to see that there are so many competitive universities. And of course, a lot of them is in China, Korea, and Taiwan. Entrepreneurial innovative, this is the subject of this seminar today. But I realized that for the University of Malaya to survive and to be the #1 and to be in the top 100, we have to be entrepreneurial. That's very, very important. I will explain what I mean by that later. We must have high international connectivity. We work with hundreds of partners across the world, and I'm happy to be signing this MOU today with Dr. Paul Chan. High mobility of students and staff. The order of the day today is that there will be a lot of students and staff moving around under student exchange and so on. Universities compete to attract the best talents. Yes, again, we need the best students and the best staff to come in order to bring up the university, no matter what their background is. And English will become the main medium. Even universities in China is using more and more English now, because otherwise you cannot have the exchange program if your lessons are not in English, you know. So these are some of the things that is happening. And on this subject of heavy investments R&D, the global R&D spending now increased from 790 billion to 1.145 trillion. Number of researchers has risen so much, and some of the Middle Eastern countries, the amount of research funding and research commitment is staggering. So I think we are in for real tough competition in terms of R&D. Now, I have to put this because this is survival for me. Let me explain why. I know that for my university to go up higher, we need more money for research. Of course, we get something like 100 million ringgit for research, but to compete with NUS, NTU and so on, we need more money than just 100 million a year. So I frightened my minister by saying that, look, give me money, otherwise I cannot be in the top 100 by 2015, you know. So I told him, our target is that by 2015 we'll be in the top 100 here, by 2020 top 100 here, and by 2025 top 100 here. And I said to do that, I need about $500 million ringgit to do this job. By 2015, I promise you, I'll be in the top 100 UM. And he seems to believe me, you see. And he has given that money. Now, sometimes if you think about it, it is crazy for a vice chancellor or president of university to promise the minister. And I told him, if we don't get to that, I will resign my job, you know. So he believed that and he's given the money. So, sir, I might not see you again in about 4 years' time. But if I have to leave my university by 2015 because it has not got to the top 100, I know that I've left behind a university that's got a lot of money for research, that my professors are happy, that they won't be crying for research money. So I'll be very happy that I've left that amount of money. But when I think about it, I have a feeling that the minister may not last that long anyway, you know? I mean, ministers move around, that's what I mean, you know? And the next minister will not remember what has been promised. So you know how Malaysian vice chancellors work, isn't it now? You know? They make promises and they buy time. But truly, Because of that money, we have jumped from 207 and currently we are at 167. So, ranking means everything to me, actually, for my own survival. And every year when it comes to about September, that is a terrible month for me, you know. There's no other more terrible time than September, when the ranking results come out. But since there will be an election soon, maybe the scenario may change, I don't know, you know. Okay, we have a transformation plan, and with the money we have got, we have been doing several things. Number one, and this is a craze in the research industry in Malaysia, we are now heavily targeting on research and publishing in ISI journals. Again, this is a very new policy. It was introduced when I came in, and I'm really being heavily criticized by so many people. But by God, you can't believe that now all the promotion criteria to become professors in the public institute uses ISI only, you know. So that is one thing that has happened in Malaysia. So Datuk Paul, don't promote anybody who doesn't have ISI paper. And a few other things, like we have now created what is called the high impact research. The definition is simple: research that produces publication in the tier 1 ISI journals. And we have created position called Nobel Fellows. At the moment, we have been able to attract 3 Nobel Prize winners to work with us. So we have their labs here and so on. One is from Australia, one from Japan, and one from US. We have improvised on teaching, evaluation, and training, whereby we want to be very sure that our academics not only do research, but they deliver on their teaching, you know. This sounds a little bit autocratic, but we actually will check on their course notes and so on, because this is absolutely important that they must do in accordance to what the accreditation agencies have spelled out. And increase international exchanges. I'll just list some of the new things that we are doing. We were at the verge of introducing a new salary scheme when the government introduced a new one, but unfortunately they withdrew it, you know. So I may have to think about it again. We have best brain scheme, whereby, for example, anyone who has a first class honors, automatic scholarship from us. And for your information, we have 200 students sponsored by us around the world doing PhD, some in US, many in the UK, in Australia, and so on. So we have even created this now. And when they come back, we will have access, and some of them may join you, Datuk, you know. So we are training for the nation anyway, you know. But we have about 200 across the world now doing their PhD. And we have a scheme to terminate problematic staff. I think you don't have 2 years, isn't it? Everybody performs here. But in my university, you have a range from the very excellent to the very lousy. So these are the people that I'm talking about. We have a way on how to handle them. But if they start producing ISI, we will not terminate them anymore, of course. We are embarking upon commercial projects. We are building one of the largest private hospitals in the country with our own money, by the way. We now currently own a government hospital, which is 1,000 bed, and which sees 1.1 million patients a year, which is the very famous University of Malaya Medical Center. We are creating a new one, 1,000 bed too, and but this is private. This is where we are hoping to get a lot of money from it also. So we will be the university with the largest medical facility in Malaysia very, very soon. And prudent spending and so on. So this I will not say very much. Now let me just tell you something, this very interesting graph. In 2011, the United States still leads the world in terms of publications. China is second, United Kingdom is third. But it is predicted that within the next 5 years, China will be #1. So a lot of things is changing very rapidly now. Now, what does this mean? That the Chinese quality in research is really going up very, very fast. Next one, ranking by citations per document. Malaysia is placed here. This is per publication, how much citations they are getting. This is a measure of quality actually. Currently it looks like that, you know. But as you see, as you go up the scale, the country that you get as you go up the scale is of a higher quality, you know. So one of the things that we want to do in Malaysia, that we want to push this upward very soon. And I think that will happen with the high impact research budget that is getting into the country. Next is GD, this is gross domestic expenditure on R&D. Very interesting graph. Again, as you go up higher, the countries that invest most in research are the one that is most productive and the highest in quality. Okay, so at the end of the day, again, the story behind all this is that you must put money into research, whether you like it or not. And trends in higher education, again, the group of companies here where the R&D expenditure as percentage of GDP are all in this area. Malaysia is still here, but I think this is going up also. And in terms of research funding among top Asian universities, I have to correct that this is now about 80 million US dollar, you know. So it is my attempt now to make sure that we actually go up the scale also. Because at the end of the day, I realized that we have to have big budget for research if we want to go up in terms of quality. There's no other way to do this. Okay, but these are how the budget, how it looks like in Asia. And in terms of world's strongest economies, from in 1870, UK is the biggest economy, but as we go on, you see that in 2010, China is quite close to US, it has beaten Japan. In 2020, China will be bigger than US, and in 2030, even India is coming up. Again, you see the economic cake is moving to the east very much, and the economic cake has very much to do with research, R&D, with education, and so on. These are very important indicators, actually. Again, this is in 2025, US, China, Japan, and look at 2050, US and India is about the same. China is up there, you know. And what is interesting is that the nearest neighbor to Malaysia, Indonesia, has a very big economy too. But there's one economist who predicted that by 2050, actually there's another graph here called ASEAN. I missed out on that graph actually. ASEAN may be the second biggest economy in the world. ASEAN, a collection of 10 countries here, may be the biggest if all the ASEAN countries get their act together. So, quite honestly, all this graph goes to show one thing. Malaysians don't go anywhere, just stay in this country and do your research and attract more international students. That's all you have to do, you know, because the future is very bright in this region. And we are sandwiched between two very large giants, China and India. And ASEAN is among the fastest growing economies in the world anyway. And because of the money they have, China has been able to launch Project 985, a total of $4.3 billion, and then they launched the Project 211, $2.2 billion, and even in Taiwan, they have the 5-year, $50 billion, and these are the two top universities there. So you see, universities in Asia is really pumping a lot of money to research. Sorry, my talk is so much about research, you know, but this is what I have to talk about. And in terms of inbound students, for my university, last year, 2011, we have 1,200 students from abroad coming to spend 1 semester, 2 semesters, and things like that. This is not including the 4,000 that we have on campus, okay? And the idea is really to build a truly international campus in our campus, you know. And the number of our students that goes out is 2,100 actually, it's not in this graph. And we are targeting that hopefully within the next 1 or 2 years, the number that we send off every year will be about NUS, which is about 3,000 a year. And for us, this is a very important program and important commitment to send as many Malaysians out and to bring as many foreign students into this university on exchange program. And because of that trick I told you that we got the high impact research budget, we have been able to push our publication. Before this, we are somewhere here. These two is Mahidol and Chulalongkorn. If you have not heard, Mahidol and Chulalongkorn are among the best in the region. They are in the top 200 often. But in 2008, we have beaten them. And we are hoping that in the next 3 years, we'll be equivalent to NTU, Nanyang Technological University. So this has only happened because of the money that we have got. So we must invest in research. And within the universities, 5 research universities in Malaysia, generally the trend is going up. This is good, I think. So the quality of Malaysian research is going up. The graduates are going up. And this is how our performance is. It has gone up again. And with more money, it will be much more than this. So, but this is general trend for all the research, the 5 research universities in Malaysia. And for us, if we look at the publications in the index in the Web of Science for this period of time, the number of journal article index has gone up from 2008, which is only 594, to 2011, which is about 2,000. And the number of tier 1 journal articles has grown up very sharply. Now, this is the most important part actually, because this is a measure of the high impact research output that we have, you know. So if you can see that the percentage of papers we are publishing is getting better.